Okay, that's our signal. We are live. It's time to start our call meeting to order. I'd like to start with an adoption of our agenda. Do I have a motion to do that?
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Brian.
I will second.
Thanks, Shannon. Excuse me. And how do you vote, Jim?
Yes.
Carla? She come back on? And Tony, I don't. Sorry, that's my phone. I don't see Tony either. Jane?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Shannon?
Yes.
And yes. Myra, can you try texting Carla and Tony to see if they're coming? All right.
Yes, I will.
Thank you. Oh, before you do that, did we have, there's Carla. Did we have anyone send in an item to present on agenda items?
No, we did not.
Okay, great. We'll move on to our consent agenda. A consent agenda is utilized by the Rolla Board of Education as a means of dealing with routine matters, which must be considered by the Board of Education but require a minimum of discussion. All Board of Education members receive and review written information supporting the items listed on the consent agenda while in advance of the meeting. While any Board of Education member is welcome to remove any item from the consent agenda for separate consideration or discussion for any reason, normally all items on the consent agenda are approved in one motion with a minimum of discussion. Is there any discussion or questions on items A through I?
I had a quick question. Hey, this Merrimack Adventure Learning Ranch, what is that?
If I understand correctly, Dr. Creedy, the RTI-RTC, I think it's for the nursing program. I'd have to read it again. They do a team building exercise out there each year, and we have to sign a contract for it. So the only reason it's in the agenda is that we have to sign it.
I was just curious. I was looking at the date and wondering if it was even going to be able to be performed. That's the only reason I was asking.
Yeah, so we're not paying for it yet. It's just for the contract to get their reservations.
Hey, Brian. We actually also use them here at the hospital for team building exercises.
Uh-huh.
So they're a lot of fun. We've taken our basic leadership teams out there. So it's a really good time and a great opportunity if it can happen.
Very good. Any other questions or discussion? I'm looking for a motion to approve consent agenda items A through I.
This is Jim. I'll make the motion that we approve the consent agenda items A through I.
Thanks, Jim. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Carla. Your caption says Sam Clayton. I'll call you Carla.
Yeah.
All right. How do you vote? Jim?
Yes.
Carla?
Yes.
Has Tony joined us? Jane?
Yes, not.
Okay.
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Shannon?
Yes.
And yes. Okay, so we'll move into new business, approval of certificated and support staff salaries. Dr. Dare, Dr. Zales?
We'll let Gina's going to drive the presentation because Dr. Dare and I will both share information with you. It's a spinoff of what Mrs. Atkinson had presented earlier. So Gina, if you could bring that up. Go ahead and advance the next slide. I won't read the mission statement to you, but everything we do, as you are aware, is rooted in our CSIP strategic plan, and in this particular case, we're working through excellence in personnel. So, go ahead and advance that, Gina, please. our CSIP Goal 2, highly qualified staff, and Strategy A is specifically where this resides in the CSIP. Okay. Just a note, we met with the Central Office Advisory Committee on April 15th on this similar platform. I also communicated with them, as I have with you during board updates, regarding legislative issues on the budget, and as recent as just this week. Very appreciative of those people that put the time in. Lisa McCarthy is the chair. Tori Snitker also is on the committee. Lorianne Chance, Cord Jenkins, Lucas Chapman, Jennifer Wall, Sarah Hedge, Billy Edgar, Jennifer Barr, and Stephanie Grisham. So real good group of people. A lot of good feedback from them, and I think they've been a good group to work with, both on the salary and the insurance. We reviewed data. Can you hear that? Can you hear me?
Yes.
We hear you.
Something just popped up on my screen. Said they could help me be better understood. So now I can't see my screen. I'm back. I'm good. So we reviewed the data from the legislative session, and we'll continue to do so as time permits. Go ahead. Here's the revenue sources that budget and actual that Mrs. Atkinson had presented, what we have on FY20 moving to what we budgeted for FY21 and the comparison 21 to 20. This is a review from our last meeting. Okay. The numbers that are most important and most impact this is the scheduled movement. As you see, 457,000, which represents about a 1.3% increase for staff. If we were to consider increasing base by every percent, that's the number impact. And then health insurance, we budgeted for 7. As you're aware, we're hopeful for less than that. I'll let Dr. Dare kind of talk through the health insurance to date, if you would, Kyle.
Yeah, sure. So our health insurance so far has trended very well. We're very pleased to report back out. We're over $500,000 up from the start of the year. We're hopeful that that's because of our education processes and those kind of things. We certainly don't know the impact of COVID. We know there have been some elective surgeries and things along that lines that have been canceled or postponed. So there is some element that those will come back in. But we were tracking very well before this all really hit. So we're hopeful for more of a 3 to 5% increase there, but we feel like we need to be conservative at this point in not knowing. And we do still have a fair amount of time left in this remaining claims year for some things to come in. So we'll continue to watch that, but overall we're very pleased with the trend for the year.
So obviously all those things can be considered if that would be the budget impact for next year. Okay. The Camdenton Salary Survey we've referenced quite a bit for a variety of things, from tax levy to bus fleet to lunch prices, et cetera. And in this particular case, what comes in first is the teacher comparisons. These are districts of like size, and ones that we typically would compete against for certificated staff. Okay. And this is the ranking. We had 18-19 data that we've been talking with you about. Now with the 19-20 data, we've remained very strong in those areas. The areas that are highlighted are those areas where we rank number 1. Our salary schedule is set to attract, just like your strategic plan, to attract and retain staff members and keep them once we get them here. We're not, even though we've hovered from 16 to 12 in that first-year teacher category, we're not far out of the top tier, and that doesn't preclude people from coming to us annually as first-year teachers. They catch up rather fast as you see there. Okay. The budget, the operating balances you see here, this is kind of a review. The last bullet after the most recent budget updates, we had projected an unrestricted fund balance of 21.74 or 10 million. Okay. And as you well know, historically we overestimate our expenditures, very conservative on the revenue side, and that's allowed us to close that gap between what we anticipate and what we happening to us as a worst case scenario, what happens to us toward the end of the year. So Mrs. Atkinson and her projections, and we've all looked at those, the unrestricted fund balance will be approximately 30%. And as you know, the floor in our unrestricted fund balance is 17%, which is approximately 2 months of operation without any help from any DESE or anyone else. Okay. So after all the time looking at what happens, what's happening in Jefferson City with the budget, which looks to K-12, at least from the budget perspective, will be spared, but we are concerned about withholdings, as we've talked about. We are recommending an average increase of just 1.3%, which is a result of just allowing movement on the salary schedule for degrees earned and years of experience. And then at a later time, should revenues come in far greater than we anticipate, you could come back and reissue contracts and consider bumping up the percentage to the base anytime between now and the start of the 2021 school year. But without question, the committee is very appreciative of your consideration for movement on the schedule. Many districts are freezing. We don't want to do that because it's impossible to unfreeze and make up time. There isn't a reason for us to consider doing that at this time. So we have a consensus recommendation with the committee to ask that you approve salaries based on movement and degrees earned. Okay. Happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Any questions for Dr. Zales or?
Yes, I have a comment, I guess, on our beginning salary. I still wish that we could do something as far as increasing that adjustment that we make, the overlay. And, you know, the beginning teachers have been impacted by percentage-wise because of our changes to our medical plan, increased, you know, deductibles. So, and I would think it would help. You say we don't have a problem recruiting, but I would hope it would help, and to be fair to them, that and not cost that much. So,
Jim, just for what it's worth, we did pull that information and started looking at that. We kind of set it aside thinking that that would be part of the discussion as we know more data going forward.
No, I agree.
We do think there's some opportunity there.
Yeah, I agree that it would, if the budget, if we do something to increase the salary, then that would be the time to consider it.
Yes,
either later this summer or next year.
And last year, one of their considerations in lieu of even salary increases was, would we ever consider doing something with RISE, you know, bumping up each cell a little bit as well. So those are two things when times are really good that we haven't done anything with the RISE stages for some time either. But they're very appreciative of that.
So does this movement include the extra duty pay as well for coaches and so forth?
Yes, it does.
Okay. How do we compare there with the others? Do you have any information on that?
Dr. Dare, you remember that? We did talk about that not too awful long ago. We're similarly situated.
Yeah, it's very similar with especially with the area schools of similar size. It's similar. There are obviously some above and some below. I don't know off the top of my head. I can't really speak to the rankings, and it's been a little while since we looked at that. Cabby keeps a pretty good eye on that, though, as far as his discussions. We can get you more information if you'd like, Brian.
Yeah, I was curious. I saw that and wondered how we compared to.
Sure.
Because some of those are pretty high-profile positions that people take a little bit more interest in and things like that. So.
Sure.
I don't know when the time to ask this. We're talking about salaries, but you also mentioned the budget withholdings, and they did have a withholding, but is that really going to impact what we projected for the year, since it was money from last year that he withheld?
Kendra, you want to speak to that? You want me?
Yeah, so the money, it's already been withheld. It was withheld from our November payment, and we never did budget to receive that money for this year. So it basically does not affect us for this year. And the withholding for the transportation funding, we budget conservatively enough that we've already received more than what I budgeted. So.
Very good. Any other questions? Okay, I'm looking for a motion to approve the recommendation of movement on the salary schedule with a potential consideration later, June or July, for increase to the base. Is that a motion?
This is Jane. I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Jane?
I'll second it. This is Jim.
Thanks, Jim. And how do you vote? Jim?
Yeah.
Carla?
Yes.
Jane?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Shannon?
Yes.
And I'm yes. Okay. Summer school. Mr. Houncliffe, what's the plan?
Well, I will try and share this presentation, and if someone will let me know if you can see it. Okay.
Looking good.
Okay. So yeah, we wanted to share with you some revised plans for our summer school program. Obviously, we were slated to have a pretty hefty seated session beginning in June, which we will not now. So kind of share with you our thoughts of how we will move forward. So I'll tell you, some of this we feel is really solid and we're ready to go. And then parts of it are very tentative and speculative, and we have quite a bit of work left to do. So I'll be sure to let you know here kind of where we stand on each one. So first of all, the June session, we would like to offer a June session of summer school running from June 1st to June 26th, which were the original dates planned for summer school. However, this session will be for online instruction only at the high school. We will offer semester credit classes, both locally designed and, if needed, some classes through launch. And I'll share with you those classes here on the next slide. But these will be full credit classes taught by teachers here in Rolla, Rolla High School staff. And should everything look okay to you guys, we will begin sending out enrollment information next week to the high school kids. What we're thinking, I've listed on this slide, we had some classes that had already been built that we had been using in past summer school sessions. You see there under the pre-existing courses. As we began thinking about this summer school session, Mrs. Norman and Mr. Smith worked with high school teachers to see what we might be able to add to our online course offerings. And so what we've built are 2 math courses, algebra and geometry, English courses, English 1, English 2, a beginning 2D art, a physical education class, which we modeled that class a little bit after what they do in launch. So we'll be purchasing activity trackers for those students to wear. So they will do their activities, be able to track the data and turn it in, and then we have the regular classroom side. So that will be new for us. Driver's education, our current plan as it stands is we will offer online, the classroom portion of driver's education in an online setting during the month of June, and then propose a driving portion in July. And we have made plans at this point for contingencies One, if we are able to go ahead and offer the driving portion as we normally do with an instructor and 3 students in a car. And then also a backup plan should that not be possible. We have modeled our class after some other online driver's ed classes that are taught remotely. And it will be logging hours with parents and filling out some log sheets and that kind of thing. So we're hopeful that will work okay. We're hopeful we're able to do the driving in July as planned, but if not, we think we have a workable backup plan for that. So those 2 slides really kind of encapsulate everything that will be going on in the June session. You can see the classes that we're offering really capture just about everything that we teach during a regular June summer school session at the high school, but it will all be moved to an online environment. So any questions or thoughts on that high school portion before I move on to the more speculative portion of the presentation? Okay. Now for our July session, this is the part that's tentative. This is what we're thinking. We will run our July session July 6th through July 31st, which is 20 days, which is our standard summer school length. We would like to offer seated classes for students K-12. Basically, we would move the time frame of our June seated summer school session into July. Now, there are lots of questions to answer and planning to be done before this would become a hard reality. One, we're working through a lot of the DESE distancing guidelines and recommendations for classrooms, so that will take a lot of planning. We're looking at alternate class options as opposed to the classes we normally offer in summer school. This would be more of a wrap up your grade level skills, specifically in math and English. And get ready for the next school year. So we are looking at alternate classes and schedules, the possibility of alternating schedules and sites to reduce the overall population at each building and getting creative with how we do that. Obviously, we would have to put in place deep cleaning plans after each day. We'd have to manage our busing and transportation plans for having kids on a bus, at least for the what we've offered in the past is in-town routes only. And so whether we do that again or how we handle that, there'll be some planning. And then how or if we want to handle food service plans during that July session. We will also offer extended school year services during July for students with IEPs. And so we would plan to do that in person. Now, all of this would be done with the idea that we will offer seated classes with the knowledge that as we get there, we may find out that we're not able to do it, or we may need to be prepared to, once we get into a seated session, circumstances may dictate that we need to stop and then switch over to a virtual model instead. So we would build this with the idea of offering seated sessions, but with a virtual class backup plan in case it doesn't work. There's also, we would also like to offer some virtual classes for those who can't come in July or who may not be comfortable coming in July so that they can still access some of the summer school programming. So for that July session, that's the part that we're speculating a little bit, and we have a lot of planning left to do and communication, so there'll be more information on that as we get into that a little more. But where we are now, our next steps, the June session will begin enrollment next week and get some high school kids enrolled for their summer credits. We are working through all of the DESE guidelines and monitoring. There is a higher level of accountability from DESE for summer school sessions this summer. They very much want to make sure that schools, the type of do no harm plans that we put in place during the spring is not approved by DESE for a full summer school session. So we've got some pre and post assurance documents from DESE that we will be filling out, detailing how we will be delivering instruction, how we will be handling communication with students, and the types of tasks that students will be asked to complete in order to have our approved summer school plan. So we'll be working through all of that and submitting that. The deadline is June 1st, and so we're working through all of those documents. Next week, I will send out a staff survey to figure out our staffing availability for a July session. Our assumption is that some of those teachers who signed up to teach in June may not be available in July, and vice versa. We may have some staff members that are now available, but part of our planning and how we handle class sizes and building populations, part of that is the staff availability that we have to build some programs to fit the population in. So we will send that out next week to get an idea about teacher interest. From there, obviously, we'll be working with all the summer school principals and overall district administrative staff, coming up with the protocols that I mentioned earlier for cleaning, distancing, transportation, all of that. We are in communication with several other districts, trying to plan together and trying to share ideas about the best ways to handle the situation. So there's a group that I meet with virtually every Friday that we'll be talking about it, and then also through some of our MASA associations, there's meetings going on. So that's kind of where we are. I would be happy to answer any questions you have or take any feedback about those plans.
Anybody have questions for Craig?
So, Craig, I just have a quick question. On the July summer session, would it still be the hours of 8 to 12 or something like that?
Well, I would say we would like to offer a 4-hour session. We would begin with an 8 to 12, whether we then want to stack on top of that, you know, an afternoon session, have a morning session and an afternoon session to decrease the population in the building. That's one idea of how you can handle some of the social distancing. So we're still playing with that, but we would like the sessions to be of similar length to what they've been in the past, which is 4 hours.
Yeah, Craig, this is Jim. A question concerning whether or not you would have additional teacher and space availability as another option to reduce your density, if you're considering that and hopeful that teachers would be available.
Yeah, and that's part of that staff survey, to just see how many staff members we have available. I think our thought is we may have to use more sites than we've used in the past to decrease the overall building population and approve smaller class sizes than we have in the past, just so that we'd be able to offer some of these classes. But as I said, a lot of that depends on our staffing availability and how many people are willing and want to be a part of the summer school program. So we hope to find that out next week from our staff survey.
And the other comment I would have would be for you to consider extending bus routes out to the country in order to pick up those students that wouldn't otherwise be able to attend, especially since we're looking at trying to finish up some coursework.
Yeah, that's something we were even considering, even for our regular summer school, of how we might want to do that. That busing part is going to be a tricky part of this whole plan of how we can bus kids in a safe manner, and whether we're able to do that or not. There are some districts that are moving forward with summer school but are ceasing their transportation that they've done in the past for that concern. I don't know that that's a good idea, but it's just one more of those things that we're going to have to plan for and figure out.
Thank you.
So we didn't put this as an action item in the agenda. It was more just some information for you guys and feedback. So I don't know that we can vote to approve it or anything, Charla, but would certainly take some guidance on any of your thoughts or changes you guys would like to see.
Mr. Hounson, this is Jane, and I was just wondering if my thought would be that with summer school, it'd be so important to have younger children. I hope, maybe, I don't know, have you thought about the books on that? Those are just learning to read and just learning their skills to really allow them in before maybe some of the higher elementary, or has that even been a thought?
No, that's a good thought. I don't know I've thought of that specifically. You know, one of the programs that I'm worried about is the incoming kindergarten program. There are some districts that are not offering that this year just because the ability to teach kids kind of school norms and what it means to be in school may be so challenging this year that that's something we're going to have to discuss whether we want to do that or not. Then also, if we aren't able to offer a seated class, putting kindergarten and first graders in a virtual class, I don't know that that's the best way to go about things either. But you're right, Jane, trying to identify those populations most in need of helping prevent the summer slide and helping them move forward. That's going to have to be part of our talks of how we do that. So I appreciate that. I don't know that we've talked about that group specifically, no.
And Craig, this is Carla. I'd also look at the population of kids maybe that have IEPs that might have some delay issues as well with going into school next year.
So there are two sides to that. One is the kids that have the extended school year written into their IEPs. And so that will be mandated. We will offer that no matter what, whether it's a seated class or virtually. But we hope to offer, we plan on offering special ed or classes for IEP students to come, even if extended school year is not part of the regular summer school, just to address that very concern, Carla, making sure they're ready for school next year. So that is, Dr. Reed has been part of the discussions, helping us understand some of the special education law and some of the IEP accountability in all of this.
Craig, Brian Krieger. Hey, I haven't seen any of the DESE recommendations yet, but has there been any talk, and obviously this is logistically very difficult to even consider, but possibility of wearing masks for teachers and students?
Brian, I've read so much of that. I don't know that masks for teachers and students was part of the guidance, but I'll need to go back and read again. Part of our concern is getting that many masks on hand. That's going to be a bit of a challenge for us, but it's something we can certainly put it in the planning to see what we can do. And I'll reread all of the DESE stuff. Most of their stuff was more about population control, staggering classes so there were less kids in the hallway, those types of things. But we'll check on all of it.
And this is Carla again. Just to add to that too, I had read some stuff too about checking temperature. I didn't know if that was in there at all or had been addressed at all.
The most recent discussion that we've heard, we were involved in some discussions with schools in Southwest Missouri. And the thought in that group, while they're not doctors, but we weren't going to do that simply because it didn't seem to be a great indicator of health or non-health. That while it may be something to think about, I don't know that we would make that part of our plan. If we get some guidance that needs to be, then we'll have to figure that part out. But I know several schools down there had considered it and had taken it off their plan just because they weren't sure that it really accomplished what they were hoping to accomplish. But we need to learn a little more, and some guidance from Dr. Creedy may be helpful as we get closer there too on some things that we can do to help mitigate some of these problems. So.
Yeah, this is Jim. I ran across an NSBA publication today.
Is that the 97-page document?
Excuse me?
Is that the very large, like 100-page document?
That is correct. But
yeah.
Most of it is appendices. So, but they talk about those things in there. So,
yeah, I've got it sitting here on my desk. I've skimmed through it and talked through parts of it with Dr. Johnson over at St. James. He had called me kind of wanting to know what we're doing. So had some ideas about the summer school that they could offer. So we shared a few thoughts back and forth, but I do need to go through it in more detail.
Yeah.
So that would mean bus drivers taking temperatures before they even got on the bus.
That is a possibility.
Charlotte, I'll just add to that conversation. Laura Robinson and I had that discussion today, and even looking forward toward the fall, if there would be the need to take temperatures to get the non-contact infrared type thermometers and to get the number we would need may be an issue. And then the timing and trying to run, essentially 4,700 people through a temperature check every day could certainly present some interesting challenges. But some of the literature that the school nurses have seen is that those temperature checks are certainly valid, but typically the exposure has already occurred by the time you take that temperature. So there may be some other things we can do that may be more beneficial and maybe less intrusive, but that guidance is changing fairly frequently, so we'll keep an eye on it.
And I'd like to add to that, so we've run into some of the same difficulties at the hospitals and the clinics. Sometimes the thermometers aren't correct, and it becomes a big hassle. So there's a lot of things that go into that. So
I thought you were volunteering to help.
I am volunteering to help.
Okay. Well, any other questions or comments for Craig about summer school?
We will certainly keep you updated as we move forward here.
Well, that kind of moves into our next item, future issues. We talked in our agenda setting that we still had a few balls in the air, that we needed to set a second meeting for the month of May. For May 21st, that would be 2 weeks from today. So we haven't set that meeting, so we would need to have a motion to have a meeting on May 21st.
I'll make the motion that we add a meeting May 21st.
Thank you. And Shannon, was that you?
Yeah, that was me.
Okay, thank you. And how do you vote? Jim?
Yes.
Carla?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Jane?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Shannon?
Yes.
And yes for me. We also already had scheduled our June meetings, June 11th and June 30th.
Ms. Jameson, I might add that 21st meeting, I've asked Renzo Boyd from Stiefel to join us. The campaign committee is getting back to being active, and we wanted to kind of touch base with you regarding our 31-2020 with the election on June 2nd. So he'll join us to kind of talk through our financing and some options that we would like to share with you. So that issue is still out there for us to work. We've pivoted to more immediate with Dr. Dare, myself, and Mr. Hounsome, and it's come off our agenda as far as discussion because we have more pressing things to work through, obviously, but we still want to talk through that with you on the 21st.
Yeah,
Good.
without that second May meeting, we would be not meeting until after the election. So there were several things on the that could be on the agenda for the 21st, so that will be helpful. Okay, we're moving down to old business. Long range facility and program update, health and safety update. Is that you, Dr. Salas?
Yeah, Doctor, we'll just kind of run through real quick what we've done with regard to that. I sent out a memorandum email yesterday to staff, just talking about and copy to you about our work schedules since the phase 1 of the reopening of Missouri has happened. It really doesn't impact us a whole lot. We have been working with modified schedules for 10, 12-month employees anyway, and that would be custodians and other support staff. Our office has staggered work schedules, and we've been and will continue to adhere with social distancing parameters. And we can do that. We're starting now to get school ready for next year, and with a lot of the custodial work. So we will continue to do that at least through the 31st with all of our 10 and 12-month support staff members. The teachers are already in. We're not changing the learning plans. With the end of school about 10 days away, those learning plans will stay in effect and the teacher contracts will end, and so will the part-time keeping people whole, so to speak, will end when their contracts would normally end on the support staff side. So it's more or less to kind of preempt any questions folks might have about what's the city ordinance and what does the governor's order due to us. So we like to think that we've been kind of ahead of that for some time, and we'll just continue to do what we do. And I would assume then that meeting on May 21st, we want to go with this platform again. Nodding the head would be fine. We'll plan accordingly. Or if you think we need to be in the building, we can try to distance.
I would be open to some advice from Dr. Creedy there. I don't think anything's changing, right, in the next 10 days?
Nope, I'd say we keep this format.
There you go.
Yeah, by the way, we did not approve that meeting yet. We didn't have a motion to approve it.
I thought I went through the vote.
Okay, we did?
Yeah.
We
All right,
did.
I was asleep at the switch, sorry.
We did.
Yes, I'm pretty sure.
All right.
You also voted to give people big fat raises, and you voted for, no, I'm kidding.
And so as far as work and learning plans go and students that teachers are staying engaged with students, we kind of embedded that in Teacher Appreciation Week video this week. I think they're doing as well as anybody can do. We're kind of in uncharted territory, have been for some time, and each week we go further into that uncharted territory. So we talked about in that staff communication, closing out the year, a plan for Dr. Dare. You want to kind of maybe share the support staff banquet update, and I'll kind of do the same with the certified.
Yeah, sure. So Tuesday night should have been our annual support staff banquet. Obviously, we had to change those plans and cancel that event, but we still want to recognize those folks. And as most of you know, we typically recognize our years of service, people for 20 years and above. We recognize perfect attendance and our retirees, of course. So to do that, we're going to do some virtual recordings. We're putting together some little goodie baskets with some items for them to pick up and enjoy the videos at home. But we're gonna run through those, and Gina's been great to help us set those up, and we'll do the same then probably for the teaching staff and the certified staff.
Yeah, and for the certified staff of Myra and Gina, and kind of piggybacking off of what Dr. Dare just said, we'll, instead of the breakfast that we'd have at the end of the school year, actually it was scheduled for the day after school ended, we would just not do that and do a similar format, screencast. We have 8 retirees, and we'll get Myra's got the awards ordered, and we suspended the Huffman Award for 1 year, so that eliminates a lot of the recognitions in terms of just sheer number of people that we would bring up. So we'll do that for them as well, and give some space between the support staff and the certified. But that's all part of health and safety, just keeping people, at where they need to be and not collectively in our buildings. Dr. Dare, you want to talk about food distribution? You have some great numbers. That continues till the end of school as well.
Yeah, I'll just talk through a few items in that regard. For the month of April, this is really fantastic, I think. We served 26,586 meals. So if you break that down, it's service. So it's a little over 1,200 meals a day, which is just fantastic if you think about the circumstances. We have continued to receive our USDA commodities. That didn't stop, but a lot of those items we can't use in our meal service currently, but we certainly don't want those to be bad, to go bad or expire. So we have, the USDA has issued guidance that we are to donate that food to food banks and other places. So to date, we have donated, those are our donated food supplies, so we're donating our donations. That makes sense. But we've donated over 600 cases of food to Grace and a few of the other registered food banks around. And so we'll continue to do that. Those shipments will continue to come and have actually increased a little bit because of the emergency declaration. So we feel like that's a great support for our community as well. We received a notice from DESE that those proposed changes to the SNAP program are in the finalization stage. My understanding is that will allow families who receive SNAP benefits to receive full maximum benefit if they qualify for free or reduced lunch at school. DESE is still waiting on federal approval for their plan for that to take effect, but they expect that to happen at any time. And I do want to just take this opportunity and just throw a special thank you out to our folks that have been coming in, between our custodial staff, our food service staff, and our bus drivers to arrange the food distribution. It's no small feat. They've been spending a lot of their own time to do some of that and making sure that we're serving safe and keeping everyone going. So I do want to say a special thank you to them for that effort. One other piece I would share with you, we have put in for an initial application to the State Emergency Management Group for some of the community relief funds that are available through the grant program. That is for items specifically related to the COVID crisis. So what we're really looking for there is just some relief to replace some of the masks and gloves and things that we have used outside of our normal routines. There will be a few other items as the plans develop. We mentioned thermometers and those kind of things. We may need to do some of that as the guidance develops. We may need to ask for some assistance for a few of those items. It's not significant by any means, but we feel like it's certainly worth pursuing to get some assistance there. So happy to answer any questions about any of that.
Okay. Any other questions about learning plans, what we've been doing, work schedules that's related to? We have had scheduled opportunities for students to be in the building to retrieve items. That's on a staggered basis. Principals are guiding that, and I would say all the principals have really good plans for having staff in the building, maintaining the distance and the number parameter, and yet still getting some of the closeout work done that needs to happen and items back to students that are in the building. So appreciate all that goes into that. I hope maybe Pearl could talk about that when she gives her report a little bit as well. And then Ms. Jameson, I'll just turn it over to you for the second part, the MSBA webinar on emergency planning preparedness.
To kind of tie into your learning plans, the MSBA also has an input question for this month that I thought would be a quick discussion, and it has to do with home internet access. So the question reads like this: education groups from around the country are advocating that the state and federal government help close the homework gap by ensuring that all students have reliable home internet access. Does your board support this initiative? I think it's more of a discussion at this point, not necessarily yes or no, we support it. But one other question that goes along with it is, do we know, and I think maybe we heard some of this in the fall with the school improvement plans, do we know how many students in our district do not have reliable internet outside of the school? I think it was, I thought I remembered hearing some of it in some of the school improvement plans in the fall, but.
We answered a DESI survey not too awful long ago, and the parameter was between 11 and 20% that did not. And the last time Ginger's on here, she might be able to help out. We did a survey several years ago, and I think it was around the same amount. But you know, this issue is certainly exposed to cracks in educational programs and the gap that can occur between the haves and the have-nots. So more needs to be done, obviously, for that. But in our case, we're finding that even the students that have access still want their hands on a packet, and the 350 plus subscriptions to the Phelps County Focus that have our learning plans in it that we purchase for students that may have internet access as well. It's interesting that there's more than one component to remote learning, but certainly that reliable internet, either given by us to them to be able to, in a device in a hotspot, or provided to the communities that are in out parts of our county, certainly appropriate. I think all of that needs to happen. we've been saying it for a long time, and now this has exposed it even more.
If I could just add something too, Charla, you know, what we're finding is not necessarily that people don't have internet, but that the reliability of it. So you may start out with the day with having great internet service, and by mid-afternoon, it's really dogging down because so many other individuals are on it. So so I think it's a combination of maybe not having internet and not having reliable internet.
Looks like Charlotte dropped off temporarily. We'll see if she comes back on.
Okay.
Maybe it's a reliable internet.
Right on cue, Carla.
Yeah.
And she's
Probably
in the
wondering
same.
why nobody's listening to her.
I think it was staged.
And we need her because she's facilitating the MSBA webinar discussion as well, as she attains her points for her board certification plus our governance award. So we'll wait just a couple seconds to get her.
Well, while we're waiting on her, I'll apologize for my tardiness. I looked at my calendar this morning and I said to Greta, I said, well, I don't know why our meeting's at 6:30 tonight. That just seems really weird. And I went about my day because I had only saved the closed portion apparently. So my apologies.
No worries, as Kyle would say. Okay. Well, we move to you, Pearl, for some comments, and then maybe by then, Charlotte will be back with us. Tell us how things are going, how you're thriving in this environment, and what we can do to better help you.
You guys hear me okay?
Absolutely.
All right. To start off, I'd like to share with you guys what online learning has looked like for the students and how the limited capabilities of online learning has been affecting us, as well as a few recent events in student life. My comments are like a little bit longer than usual, but stick with me because I want to represent the student perspective as best as I can.
You bet.
As we expect, students are completing their online work using mainly Google Classroom, the Remind app, Gmail, etc. While online meeting sites like Google Meet and Zoom are used in several classes, I did not hear about classes using them as much as I would have predicted. As I think Dr. Zales mentioned, this may, or maybe Carla, but this may be connected to how much we rely on internet connection, because even in this board meeting, it's a little bit rough to maintain the internet connection. And so for students who don't necessarily have all the technology, joining these classes are a lot more difficult. Teachers are naturally taking the content at a lot slower pace than they would have during an average school year, but after we're now months into teaching online, the pace of classes have definitely reached a comfortable rate of learning. Most of my classes that focus on note-taking, like AP Bio, have recorded themselves in screencast and shared it out to us for us to watch and take notes as we would in class. And if we have any questions over the content, we are urged to get in contact with them through Gmail or Google Classroom and get feedback. From what I see on social media, my personal experiences, and students I've spoken with, for a generation who grew up surrounded by technology, online learning has been unexpectedly difficult to adapt to. As a person who has a lot of experience with online classes, I thought that switching to an online interface wouldn't be a hard transition from a seated curriculum for myself and probably most other students with internet access. However, I've been seeing myself and many other students struggling to focus on their schoolwork during a time when we are inhibited by little socialization and financial difficulty and a lot of personal family situations spurred by the pandemic. The limited kinds of schoolwork available for online assignment has also been a big factor in our lack of personal accountability when completing our work. I think Dr. Zales mentioned how physics physical packets could help, even if you do have a reliable internet connection. And I feel like a lot of us with this freedom to manage our time independently, we're definitely struggling to keep our heads in check and maintain our schoolwork, especially when we have a do no harm policy. So I think that the policy helps us more in the end, especially considering how students are struggling through the pandemic.
Very good. Hey, is she frozen or is she? Charlotte, I see you're back. We moved on to Pearl's comments and then thought we'd come back to you to facilitate the MSBA discussion on emergency planning. It looks like Pearl is frozen. Are you still with us? That's,
I did have a question for her, if she can still hear us.
I still say all of the technical difficulties were staged.
well, we were so much better at the last meeting.
Wow. Yeah, you guys just went away. I don't know what happened to my connection.
So also in regard to Pearl's comments, I want to make sure we congratulate her. We got an email today from Mr. Haberman. Pearl was part of a group of students who competed at the state level for Future Business Leaders of America and competed against kids all across the state. We had lots of high finishers, but Pearl won first place in the state of Missouri in the Introduction to Business competition, which just placing at state is quite an honor, but to win first place is certainly worth a hearty congratulations from everyone. So I just want everyone to know that.
Okay. I see she's still with us, but her mic is muted and her face is now gone to an image, so.
This is Pearl. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. My the device that I'm using ran out of connection, and now I'm on my phone using only my voice. Is that okay? Can you still hear me?
You bet. Yes. Did you hear you were just congratulated for your Future Business Leaders prowess?
Thank you.
Yeah. Did you hear all that Mr. Housen said?
I heard like the last part of it, but I really appreciate it, and I wrote that down in my comments too. I was going to share that we had 9 individuals and teams who placed at FBLA, and I think that we should probably look at that for student recognitions next week, which we haven't had in a little while for coronavirus.
Yeah.
But I'm very excited of how well we did, and especially with the award ceremonies this morning. I think everyone at FBLA was very excited, even though that our 3-day trip that was going to be for the state conference ended up being canceled. We're excited to see where we go next year. I don't know, I'm very proud of them.
Yeah, you should be. You should be. Yeah, we are trying to figure out how we can best do, we have a few student and staff recognitions that we need to try to put into the agenda. As we get better at this Google Meet, we can get better at those type of presentations. Okay.
Well, I was going to ask Pearl. I didn't know if she or any of her friends had expressed some interest in summer school, if that was one of her plans for the summer to be involved in some of the online learning that we've got going on.
Yeah, I was thinking about summer school, and I wasn't exactly sure what stance to take on it. I'm glad that we ended up undertaking launch like 2 years ago, maybe. I was a person who participated in online classes for the last, ever since I was in 8th grade or going to my freshman year. And I wish that as teachers and students, we had a little more experience with this online learning. So I think that even if it turns out that having a seated classroom in July is a little bit too much for us to handle. I think that the offerings with launch can cover a lot of student needs, and we can be very flexible, especially with programs with credit recovery, which I think should be one of our biggest priorities for summer school, because much of what summer school is giving us something to do and get ahead on our credit, but for some students, summer school is essential to them graduating. And so I think the priority right now for summer school really should be on the credit recovery programs, whether that needs to be online or in a seated class.
Very good. Got all that, Mr. Hanson?
Credit recovery is a part of the offerings we will have. It always has been, but it will continue to be. Yes, thank you.
Very good. Sorry about my internet, just kind of flashed. You guys all just went away. And so we were talking a little bit when I left about the homework gap that's created by the lack of internet. Does anybody else have any thoughts to add? Or there's a question on this form that I thought would be nice for us to talk about. Share an example or two of how education has continued in your district despite the COVID-19 shutdown, and it gives an opportunity to give a shout out. I don't know if any of you have experience with a teacher, or you've heard about someone in the community and their teachers. I think our teachers all together are going above and beyond the call of duty. I've heard lots of really great things. Does anybody else have something to share there?
Yeah, I think things have gone pretty well. I was a little bit slow to get on board with my kids' learning programs with everything that was going on at the hospital. Now that things have slowed down, I've had a chance to get a little bit more involved. My son's got great lesson plans through the high school, and then my youngest daughter, Abby in particular, her teacher, Marissa Tompkins, has done a really great job. She's hosted Zoom meetings, and I've been impressed. I think she's done a fantastic job. So.
I've witnessed some coaching on Zoom meetings, so that's kind of fun too.
Hi, it's Carla. So I also, my kids have been participating in some Google Meet with their teachers. I also would like to give a shout out to Mr. Sidwell. Of course, Sam is on an IEP, and Mr. Sidwell has been so kind to stop by every Monday and gives me a packet of work for Sam to do. So I definitely agree that teachers are definitely going above and beyond. And it's very much appreciated.
And I'll speak, I hope Mrs. Hammond isn't tired of hearing me to get help with me relearning chemistry to help a young man in chemistry. But that has been a whole new world. So I would say I've learned a lot during this time. I can do a theoretical and actual yield of chemical equations, and so I feel like my life has been added to here. So I hope she doesn't get tired of hearing from me.
Charla, I might throw out to you, I think it's been, some things that people don't see, but the teachers have really come together and supported one another through this whole process. And they have meetings similar to this on a constant basis between grade levels and content areas, sharing ideas and what's working and what they're having trouble with, and seeing them come together and support one another as professionals has been really wonderful.
That's great. Anybody have anything to add on the internet access for all students topic? Other than we'd like them to all have it. Okay, so we had our spring meeting was changed to a virtual meeting, and they put up some videos. Our region had a video. It was called "It's an Emergency. What's Your Plan?" Did some of you get a chance to watch that? Shannon, I see you nodding. Jim, I know Tony. I know that our superintendents were watching. Carla, I gotcha. So there's a little follow-up sheet so that our district kind of gets credit for that. Part of us having people there will get us towards the governance award, which I believe their plan is to do all of those awards now in the fall, since they're not doing that June meeting. I did see something virtual being planned, but I don't know exactly what that is. So here's a few questions. What are the strengths of our emergency plan?
I'll take at least start that, and Kyle, you can kind of chime in. Our emergency planning falls into three categories, which we've talked about before. That's facilities planning, the processes and procedures that go with that, and then people, personnel. And I think one of the strongest attributes we have, I think we have a strong facilities plan, and that 10-year plan addresses safety, and that's part of what our ongoing efforts are. But the relationships we have with the personnel, the first responders, the police department, the fire department, other emergency planners, that formal and informal relationship that we have that I think is hard to quantify in words. All you need is an event happen, and then you see the value and the relationship there that occurs, how quickly they responded, even how quickly things are avoided as a result of that. I'll just start there. But everything, I think the strength is that our planning goes into to those three phases and never stops.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. I think the people, the relationships are the crucial part. The one thing I would comment on that we do try to work through is having a plan rigid enough to address the things it needs to address, but also flexible enough to be adapted to the situations. Obviously, any emergency situation is going to look different, and there's really no way to put on paper what all those alternatives could be. So we try to talk through those with the staff and make sure they're aware of who to reach out to for help and assistance, and to be flexible. And number one priority is just to take care of our students and staff. That's the whole focus.
So there's just a couple questions here to follow up. Do you have any questions, and just as to the board, do you have any questions about our emergency operations planning? It's a good time to ask.
Yeah, from me, not so much a question as it's overwhelming to look at all of the different facets of each step of it and how many steps there are to the process, how much there is to keep track of, how difficult that must be to keep up on top of it, keeping it fresh. It's kind of in and of itself, it's a pretty large undertaking was obvious to me after watching the video.
Charlotte, this is Shannon.
Hi, Shannon.
And they mentioned in the presentation about quick reference guides. And is that something we have, or because we're switching to this alerta system, then we're going to be able to provide that direction? And I was kind of I didn't understand, because you can imagine emergency and really someone's going to look at a guide, you know what I mean? So I just wonder where we landed on that.
So a couple of things there, Shannon. Quick reference guides, if you get into the details of what they're talking about there, can be as simple as those signs that we've all seen in the classroom of, in case of tornado, do XYZ, or the fire evacuation maps, those kind of things. But what we're hoping to move to through some of the bond processes and moving forward are those digital versions where they take those things with them and can adapt and react, where it gives specific instructions, where they're not digging through an index and a plan, just like you're saying. And that's kind of the way we treat our emergency operation plans as a whole. It's a great guide, and it's the exercise of talking through those things. But in the event of an emergency, we're not going to reach for that binder and start with number one on the list. We're going to react to the situation and depend on our training and those things, the drills that we do and those types of things to get through the situation. And so that's a great question. And those quick reaction items are probably the key to the whole thing, because that's the immediate action. What do we do in the moment? I hope that helps.
And each We do have a crisis manual that does have what ifs and segregated charts, and there is a little flip chart associated with that that's updated every year based upon feedback we get from first responders and typically the police for training, and from our insurance carrier music if there's drill changes. Building, as Kyle mentioned, building schematics change with construction, so that changes evacuation routes, and all that is evaluated. Matt Fridley is in charge of adding and subtracting things from each crisis manual. We don't make the crisis manual available. I know where mine is in my desk for each of those items. Everyone has one. But when a real event happens, sometimes you don't run to the manual right away. It's something you review and you try to put at least some high-level knowledge in your mind, try to memorize it, and then kind of know what to do instinctively in situations like that.
So is our plan going to get modified to account for operating with COVID around?
Yeah, I was just going to say that. I suspect school safety has taken on yet another dimension. We've always had flu season protocols, and we monitor attendance and deep clean, and those things are happening during flu season. Most people aren't aware of them. We just continue to do them, but I think those are going to be just the sheer sharing what we do will be much more important. And yeah, I think there'll be a lot of opportunity to purchase items. The vendors, even on the online curriculum, I get at least 10 a day on those that are willing to help. So there's a new business venture that is born out of some of these things too. So.
Well,
yeah.
What happens if a case arises in the school and
yeah,
you close that building, you close the school district, or what? So again, these are questions without answers that showed up in this MSBA CES document that the rest of the board might look up and browse through.
I can send that to Mara if you like, and she can forward that out on an email.
Yeah, or the link, and they can download it, whatever's easiest.
Okay.
So I also have a question too. It's been a little while, so I couldn't remember if the MSIP 6 school safety standards, if that was part of the new board training that we went through.
I doubt it, because the standards were not fully adopted at that time when you went through yours.
Okay. Has it been added since then?
I don't know that off the top of my head.
The only training that I know was added, and I don't even think they gave us a deadline date to have it done by, was the additional sexual harassment traiment.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that I've known of that they've added recently.
And the child abuse and neglect, that part of safety.
Right. So I sent that actually back to them as a question for them to consider adding that in. And I didn't know if it was something that we needed to include in the orientation that we do with you, Dr. Zales.
You'll be doing it with me.
Well, it won't be with you.
Wait, why not?
You can do it however you want to do it. I mean, I'm happy to do your board orientation. I'm just kidding. I'm sorry.
So maybe it's a question.
MSIP 6 does have more, Craig help me, and Kyle, more board governance pieces to it than the MSIP 5 did.
Yeah, it brings back some of the I don't want to say the old process standards, but those similar type of things where there's more, I guess, governance type items involved. I have not seen a final production of those.
MSIP 5 was purely performance-based, and they were wanting to, as Dr. Dare mentioned, bring back some of those resource and process standards into them. But I don't think they are fully complete and published yet.
No.
They would be a couple years away from going into effect too.
Yeah, they were out for public comment, and then everything just kind of went away for a while. I'm sure it'll resurface. That's a good question. I haven't thought about MSIP 6 I thought of anything for like that for some time.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments about the it's an emergency, what's your plan? Okay. I was about to say Pearl, but we've already done that part. Don't forget that there are some written reports, and our next meeting will be May 21st. And I need a motion to go into closed session.
I'll make
that
a motion.
Thanks, Shannon.
I'll second.
Thanks, Tony. How do you vote? Jim?
Yes.
Carla?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Jane?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Shannon?
Yes.
And yes from me. So we're going to close out of this, and we'll reopen in a new session, and we'll be closed.
Okay, see you all in a few minutes.